46 million kilograms of plastic. That's how much the ocean cleanup has removed from our ocean so far. That's roughly the weight of 300 blue whales. And last year, they broke another record. And there's much more good news. Guatemala is no longer allowing oil drilling in one of Central America's most important rainforests. The guinea worm disease is on the verge of being wiped out. And 10 European countries just committed over $11 billion to share wind power. I'm Freddy, and here are plenty of good news stories that will make you smile. We are starting today with great news for one of nature's most iconic animals. Polar bears in Norway are the fattest they've been in years. For polar bears, sea ice is everything. They use it as a platform to hunt seals when they come up for air. And in one corner of the Arctic, that ice has been vanishing faster than anywhere else. Svalbard is a remote group of Norwegian islands deep in the Arctic. Between 1979 and 2014, it was losing ice more than twice as fast as any other polar bear habitat. With that much habitat loss, you would expect these bears to be getting thinner and weaker. But the truth turned out to be far more surprising. The Norwegian Polar Institute was tracking 770 adult bears between 1995 and 2019. In the late 1990s, as sea ice melting sped up, the bears did get thinner. But from around 2000 onwards, both males and females actually grew healthier and stronger. It turns out that for a species as adaptable as the polar bear, there are more ways to survive than you might think. They adapted by shifting their diet and started hunting reindeer, bird eggs and walrus. But that's not the only positive development for our planet. 10 European countries just committed over $11 billion to build a massive clean energy network across the North Sea. This January, countries including Germany, France and the UK signed the Hamburg Declaration. But here's what makes this different from any previous wind project. Traditionally, each wind farm connects to just one country. But this time, they are building wind farms that connect to multiple countries at once through shared cables. It's more efficient, cheaper, and requires less infrastructure. Together, they are building 100 gigawatts of offshore wind power by 2050. To put that in perspective, that's enough electricity for 143 million homes. That's more than all the households in Germany, France, and the UK combined. And the first 20 gigawatts are already being set in motion for the 2030s. The timing isn't a coincidence. Russia's invasion of Ukraine exposed how dependent Europe was on imported gas. Countries have been looking for ways to secure their own energy ever since. And if that wasn't enough, this project will create 90,000 jobs and reduce power costs by 30% over the next 15 years. The North Sea is set to become Europe's clean energy hub. Now, let's turn our attention to medicine. North Carolina just erased $6.5 billion in medical debt for 2.5 million people. Late last year, the state turned to its government healthcare program to get all 99 hospitals on board. It's called Medicaid, and it funds healthcare for low-income patients across the US. The state used it to make hospitals a simple offer. When hospitals sign up, they need to clear the debt. In return, they receive extra payments funded by the state and federal funds. Most of their debt was simply never going to be paid back anyways. So for the hospitals, it was an easy choice. And every single one signed on. But signing on came with more than just clearing the debt. Hospitals also had to change their policies permanently. They now have to offer completely free care to lower-income patients. That covers a single person earning under $30,120 a year or a family of 4 earning under $62,400. And even the middle class qualifies for discounts of up to 75%. On top of that, medical debt can no longer be reported to credit agencies. And this is big. Medical debt on credit reports can block people from getting loans and renting apartments. The debt relief is still ongoing. Hundreds of thousands of people are receiving letters telling them their debt has been cleared, with more on the way. We've actually covered stories like this before. Arizona erased $429 million in medical debt, and LA County cleared almost $3 billion of it. But North Carolina takes it to a whole new scale. Hospitals now have to permanently cap interest rates and limit aggressive debt collection practices. They also have to automatically screen patients for financial help without them even having to ask. So this doesn't just erase the past. It changes the system to stop medical debt from building up in the first place. Let's head to Southeast Asia, where Singapore is making a change for the environment. This month, the country is launching a bottle deposit scheme. Here's how it works. When you buy a bottled or canned drink, you pay an extra 8 cents. Return the empty container to a collection point and you get your 8 cents back. The goal is to boost recycling and reduce waste. Countries like Australia and several US states already do this. So do European nations like the Netherlands and Sweden. And to be honest, as a German, I used to think that every country had this system. It's a small change, but an effective tool to reduce waste. Across the Pacific, a new study reveals that lead levels in American hair samples have dropped nearly 100 times since the 1970s. And we are also heading to Guatemala, where one of the world's most important rainforests is finally getting the protection it deserves. The guinea worm is on the verge of being wiped out. And we have an exclusive interview with the Ocean Cleanup about their record-breaking year. I will show you all of these good news stories in just a moment. You might not know this, but producing these videos is only possible because of our partners. And that is why I quickly want to thank DeleteMe for sponsoring this video. So there's this whole industry of data brokers that legally collect and sell your personal information. Your name, email, phone number, even your travel history. And here's a crazy example. A company owned by major airlines was recently reported to have sold billions of flight booking records to US government agencies. We are talking names, itineraries, even payment details. If you've booked a flight in the past few years, there's a good chance your data was included. The government used this information to quietly track people's travel patterns, without a warrant, as reported by 404 Media. And of course, most people had no idea this was happening. And that just doesn't feel right. Especially since it feels like we never gave them permission to do this. But luckily, we have rights to get our names off of these lists. That's why I started using DeleteMe. They file hundreds of removal requests on my behalf to get my data removed from these lists. Every month I get a clean, simple report showing where my data was found and removed. I honestly wouldn't have the time or patience to do that myself. Big fan of their work and really happy that they support Good News. There's a link in my description, joindeleteme.com/goodnews. When you click the link, it helps support the channel and you also get a huge 20% off when you use code GOODNEWS. And now, let's get back to the study showing that lead levels in human hair have dropped by nearly 100 times since the 1970s. Researchers from the University of Utah analyzed hair samples from local families spanning over a century. The findings reveal just how toxic our environment used to be. Lead is a dangerous neurotoxin that acts like calcium in the body, getting absorbed into bones and crossing into the brain. And here's what makes it so harmful. The brain needs calcium to help neurons communicate with each other. To do that, special channels open at the tiny gap between brain cells, letting calcium flow in. That flow triggers signals for learning and memory. But lead slips into those same channels instead. Once inside, it interferes with those signals. And slowly, connections between brain cells begin to weaken and break down. The damage shows up in many ways. It causes memory loss and learning problems. And in children, it can permanently stunt brain development. For decades, lead was embedded in everyday life. It was in the gasoline powering cars, the paint on the walls of homes, and the pipes carrying drinking water. By 1970, Americans were breathing in roughly a kilo of lead per person every year. That is insane. And most of them had obviously no idea. But that was also the year everything changed. Frustration about pollution had been building for years, and the government finally acted. The EPA was established, and lead was one of its first targets. Leaded gasoline was phased out. Paint manufacturers were banned from using it, and the pipes running into homes had to meet strict new standards. Lead exposure dropped. Old hair samples contained nearly 100 times more lead than modern ones. Children today grow up without the brain damage that affected earlier generations. And this wasn't just a victory for the United States. Countries around the world took similar steps. In 2021, the last country still using leaded gasoline finally used up its remaining supply. The United Nations estimates the global phase-out now prevents over 1.2 million premature deaths every single year, and millions more are growing up healthier. And over in Guatemala, leaders made a major decision. The country chose not to renew an oil contract for Campochan when it expired in August of last year. The oil field sits inside Laguna del Tigre National Park. The park spans around 3,500 square kilometers within the Maya Biosphere Reserve. It's part of a wildlife corridor connecting Guatemala, Belize and Mexico. But for years, it's been under serious threat. Oil operations cause pollution in the reserve. And illegal cattle ranching, logging and drug trafficking kept spreading through the area. We've actually covered this region before in a previous video. That's when the three countries announced plans to create the Great Maya Corridor. It would become one of the largest rainforest reserves in the Americas, with the goal of allowing wildlife to move freely across all three borders. And ending oil drilling here is a major step towards making that happen. The oil field is being converted into a military and police base to crack down on those illegal activities. The president of Guatemala said, "This is the start of reclaiming land that's been taken over by criminal operations. There's still work ahead on enforcement and corruption. But for one of Central America's most important forests, it's a step in the right direction." Let's take a look at another encouraging story for our planet. Louis spoke with the team behind one of the most ambitious environmental projects in the world.
My name is Laurent Le Breton. I am the head of research for the ocean cleanup.
Every year, around 2 million tons of plastic enter the ocean from rivers. Much of it accumulates in specific areas, where marine life gets trapped or eats it by mistake. And that is the problem the ocean cleanup is trying to fix. And they have set themselves one of the most ambitious targets in environmental history.
So the ocean cleanup's goal is to remove 90% of floating ocean plastic by 2040. That's actually a huge goal. What was your initial strategy to solve this or to make this happen?
We have two approaches. One is we are trying to intercept plastic before it reaches the ocean. And then we also focus on removing what we call legacy pollution, so plastic that has accumulated over decades.
And we can already see the results.
Well, in 2025, we reached a total, since we started actually, about 46 million kilograms that were removed from rivers and ocean. So if we look at actually our impact over the years, you see that we're more or less doubling every year.
Last year alone, they collected over 25 million kilograms of that total. To put that total impact into perspective, 46 million kilograms is the same weight as 300 blue whales. And a large portion of that plastic came from one place.
So the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is the largest accumulation of floating plastic in the world's ocean. It is located halfway between the state of Hawaii and California, and it is covering an area of around 1.6 million square kilometers.
That is an area bigger than France, Germany and Spain combined.
You find all sorts of plastics, from real tiny microplastic fragments to very large objects like fishing nets, fishing gear that has accumulated over the last decade.
And cleaning it up requires a very specific approach.
The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is not an island, it's not a continent of plastic, it's more like a soup of plastic. We're trying to concentrate that plastic. So we're skimming the surface of the ocean, and it's the System 03 is a couple kilometers long C-shaped barrier that is pulled by two vessels. And so the C-shaped system is concentrating the plastic into the center. In the center, we have something called the retention zone, where the plastic accumulates. Once that retention zone is full of plastic, we bring it back onto one of the vessels, and then we retrieve all the plastic.
And once retrieved, that plastic doesn't go to waste. It gets recycled and turned into new products. So here's what they are doing right now.
This year we are focusing actually on testing what we call a steering strategy. So we'll have like flying drones that will detect plastics, and that will help our vessels to essentially steer into very high polluted areas of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So it's a mix of numerical modeling, artificial intelligence, and in-situ observation.
With more plastic removed every single year, their 90% target is getting closer. You can support them in several ways. Just check out their website, theoceancleanup.com. I will put a link in the description. An incredible project, and one that is only just getting started. Scotland is also making moves to protect its wildlife, helping endangered birds make a comeback. The country just passed a law that requires so-called swift bricks in all new buildings. These bricks are hollow and built into walls. They create nesting spaces for swifts and other endangered birds like sparrows and starlings. Swifts have declined by 60% in Scotland since 1995. Modern insulation sealed off the roofs where they used to nest. The approach has already worked in Gibraltar. Swift populations stabilized and recovered there. And now Scotland is set to do the same. By the way, if you're enjoying our videos, don't forget to subscribe for more good news. And I have a lot more good news to share with you. The world is close to eliminating a devastating parasite. In 2025, there were only 10 cases of guinea worm disease reported worldwide. Guinea worm spread through contaminated drinking water. And what it does to the human body is truly hard to imagine. The parasite grows inside an infected person into a worm up to a meter long. It then exits through the skin in a painful blister. In the mid-1980s, the Carter Center launched its eradication program. Jimmy Carter, who founded the center after his US presidency, raised $500 million for the program. He donated water filters and visited affected villages to raise awareness. At that time, around 3.5 million people across 21 countries suffered from guinea worm disease. And last year, just 10 cases were reported in 3 countries. And none of this required medicine or a vaccine. Instead, the Carter Center worked with governments to train communities to filter their drinking water and report new cases. Volunteers taught neighbors to do the same, and the results speak for themselves. Guinea worm is on track to become the second human disease in history to be completely wiped out after smallpox. With just 10 cases remaining, 0 is finally within reach. Next up, the electric car industry might have just solved one of its biggest problems. The world's first mass-produced electric car with a sodium-ion battery just launched in China. It was built by 2 of China's leading car and battery companies. The vast majority of electric cars today run on lithium batteries. They pack a lot of power into a small space, giving cars a longer range. But they come with problems. Prices have tripled since 2021 because supply can't keep up with demand. Most of the world's lithium is processed almost entirely in China, making the supply chain vulnerable to trade disputes. And as EV adoption grows rapidly, the pressure on that supply is only going to increase. That's where sodium batteries come in. It is far more widely available and doesn't face the same supply issues. The main challenge right now is energy density. Sodium batteries store less energy for their size. That means the new model gets around 400 kilometers per charge, while the lithium version gets 630. But as production scales up, sodium-ion batteries could make EVs significantly cheaper and far less dependent on just a few countries for its supply. And that's it for today's video. So, which of these good news stories did you like the most? As always, let me know down in the comments below. And if you want to get your data removed from the internet, make sure to try Delete Me with our link in the description to get 20% off. Thanks again to Delete Me for sponsoring this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye!